All right, welcome to the 18th edition of Before the Battle. I'm Nick Baldwin, your host for today, and joining me, as always, is the man behind BestFightPicks.com, Daniel Levy, back on the show. Daniel, how's it going?
It's going amazing. Fight week is finally here, man. Aldo versus McGregor. We've been waiting for it.
Yeah, and I should mention right off the hop that we will be talking about all three UFC cards happening Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So it's going to be a long episode, but it's definitely worth it. And also joining us, as always, is a writer for Sportsnet.ca and today's Knockout.com. Go Paolo, back on the show. Paolo, how's it going?
Oh, I'm going great. Really effing excited for this
I know.
fight week. I mean, I feel like it's been so long, man. I know we've had UFC events not last week, but like the week. Yeah, but last week, the last 2 weeks before that. But it feels like we didn't. Like in comparison to this, come on.
It's been a while since we've had like a really big event. Obviously, Holm Rousey. Like I said before that card happened that it wasn't a stack card, but of course with the upset it was still a great night of fights. But really, before this weekend, the last stacked card would have been probably UFC 192. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I mean, nothing stacks up to the magnitude of this. I think UFC 189 was probably the best, UFC pay-per-view in UFC history. But now that that's in the past, UFC 194, dudes, brace yourselves.
Like the
Go
prelims
ahead.
for 194 is good enough. Is even better than most of what the TV cards and Fight Pass cards we've been getting. It's just
I
so
know.
stacked, man. It's like, and then we have Edgar Mendez before that. Oh, whatever. We'll get into it then. But it's
Yeah.
just so many, man. It's like you're a kid and you just stepped in a candy store for like the first time ever, and you're just overwhelmed with what's going on that you can't even process it. That's what it's like.
All right, we have a lot of fights to talk about. So let's start out on the prelim card of UFC Fight Night 80. That is the Thursday show. Aljamain Sterling, number 5 bantamweight contender, taking on number 10 Johnny Eduardo Daniel. A fantastic 135-pound matchup between two contenders, rising contenders. Of course, Eduardo a bit older, Aljamain Sterling training over at Cerro Longo. He's really on the climb. Who do you like in this matchup?
A lot of people are calling Aljamain Sterling a future UFC champion, so we're going to see what he's all about because Johnny Eduardo is no joke. Obviously he trains out of Nova União, and if there's one thing that Nova União is known for besides their dynamic striking is their takedown defense. We know Aljamain Sterling wants to get this fight to the ground, and if Johnny Eduardo, has been training with Aldo, I think he's going to be able to stuff those takedowns, and we could see a very big upset here. So it just depends which Johnny Eduardo shows up. But, if he shows up out of shape or something like that, then Aljamain Sterling is going to dominate him on the ground. But, man, this is a very intriguing matchup, and I can't wait to see what happens.
All right, Paulo, are you going with the big favorite here, Aljamain Sterling, or are you going with Johnny Eduardo for the massive upset?
I'm going to have to go with Aljamain Sterling here. But if we're talking about fantasy or betting-wise, I think Johnny Eduardo is definitely a live play you could use because, like Daniel said, Eduardo is a Nova União type of fighter. I believe he's even their striking coach. Yeah, if he keeps the fight standing, I think Aljamain Sterling is going to be in a lot of trouble. I know Aljamain Sterling's tough. He's obviously well-trained in the striking department too, but Johnny Eduardo's just on another level. And I'm seeing like a big price for Aljamain Sterling. I think he's like up to 7-1 favorite now or something. I'm like, oh guys, like just relax over here, okay? Johnny Eduardo has a very clear path to victory, but I think Sterling's gonna roll here.
Yeah, Aljamain Sterling should win this fight, and like Paul mentioned, he's not deserving of minus 750 odds or whatever he is at the moment, but he definitely should be the favorite. He's definitely the guy that should win this fight. He's training at Cerro Longo, so that by itself says something. Another thing, coming off a big win over Takeya Mizugaki, lots of people, some people say, oh yeah, Takeya Mizugaki, not that great, but honestly, he still was a top 10 guy at the time. Aljamain Sterling, I really do think this guy, and yes, he hasn't been in the best terms with the UFC, but if that's kind of all cleared up and whatnot, if the guy stays in UFC, doesn't test free agency market and stuff like that, I do think this guy will contend for the UFC championship one day. He's still young, and with Sterling, he grinds out fights, but at the same time, he keeps it exciting. He kind of grinded out Mizugaki, I guess you could say. But I still enjoy that fight. I think we see I think Sterling will grind out Johnny Eduardo here. He won't want to stand with him for sure. But I do think Aljamain Sterling will win this fight. Probably not inside the distance. Eduardo is pretty tough, but probably a dominant unanimous decision. All right, moving on, we have Tim the Dirty Bird Means taking on John Howard in the headliner of the UFC Fight Pass prelim card. Paulo, are you going with Beans or are you going with Doomsday?
I just actually posted a bet recently and had Team Means as part of a two-leg parlay. Means, like this fight, I really like this fight, man. I think it has potential to be a really cool scrap. I mean, most of Team Means' fight are pretty entertaining, but I just don't think Howard is going to be able to keep up. I mean, Doomsday has been one of the toughest, if not the toughest fighter there is. But recently he just got polished, man. He got polished by, what's his name? Lawrence Larkin, and he's been in a lot of 3-round wars, man. Every John Howard fight is like, it's like tough to watch in both a good way and a bad way. So I think Means is gonna eat him in the clinch, man. I think if it ever gets there, like Team Means is gonna throw those dirty elbows and he's gonna just take out Howard. Maybe not by finish, or actually no, there's a good chance of a finish. Maybe Team Means by TKO at some point, and there's gonna be blood.
No kidding. There's blood in every single Team Means fight. So, Daniel, are you going with Tim Means or are you going to John Howard for the upset? And before you break down that fight, why don't you we can't just let the sunglasses go completely ignored. So let us know why you have the shades on.
The king dresses however he wants to dress, Nick.
All right, go ahead. Means Howard, who you got?
You know, obviously, I got to go with Tim Means here. I think that, John Howard, he's an old school vet. He's an OG. I got a lot of respect for him. He's got a great left hook, good leg kicks, and back in the day, he put up some really good fights, against Jake Ellenberger and back in his prime. So I got a lot of respect for Doomsday Howard. But I think at this point in his career, Tim Means is, he's in his prime, and his striking is looking better than ever. That fight with Matt Brown, one doesn't simply go in there and try to fight Matt Brown. Most people, like former champion Johnny Hendricks, he tried to take down, Matt Brown and hold him down and avoid the fight. Tim Means didn't avoid the fight at all. And, he recently made a comment that, Dana White just signed him to a new contract and gave him a very nice bonus, even gave him a handwritten letter because he appreciated the effort that Tim Means put forward. And in this specific matchup, I just think he's going to knock out John Howard here. So I got the Dirty Bird.
Yeah, I'm going to complete the hat trick here. I like Tim Means by stoppage. And like Daniel mentioned, I have a lot of respect for John Howard. He's a very cool guy. But at this point, Tim Means is the better fighter. He really, John Howard doesn't have a whole lot left in the gas tank. Tim Means, this guy has been super impressive as of now, like recently, coming off a loss to Matt Brown, but there's no shame in losing to Matt the Immortal Brown, a top guy for sure. Only loses to the best of the best. Obviously, last two losses to Robbie Lawler and Johnny Hendricks, current champion and former champion. Tim Means, he was riding a great winning streak, lost that fight. Like I said, no shame in doing that. His striking is improving. John Howard's chin isn't the best anymore. I like it all adds up. I like Tim Means here by TKO, probably in the first or second round. All right, moving on, the opening fight on the main card. I'm really looking forward to this one. Elias the Spartan Theodoro returns to action against Thiago Santos. Daniel, are you going with the Canadian or the Brazilian?
On paper, there's two ways this fight could go. Either Elias Theodoro is going to grind him out, or Thiago Santos is going to catch him with a big kick. So, it's just about which way you're favoring. Now, as far as who I'd rather hang out with, Elias Theodoro seems like a really cool dude, and, I'd probably go out, and hang out with him, but I really like Thiago Moretta's style, man. I think he's fought better guys, and I think he's going to catch him with one of those kicks. But if Elias Theodoro goes out there and grinds him out, I'm not going to be surprised because, he's a very relentless guy. That's one thing he does bring to the table is that, he's very aggressive. He never stops. He's got that heart for days. But, I don't care how tough you are. If you eat one of those kicks, you're going down. So I'm going to lean with Moretta, but we'll see what happens.
All right, Paulo, and we're both Canadians, so Trying to avoid the bias. Are you going with Elias Theodorou, who's returning? And I want to quickly say that this guy, he's been out of action since March, and not because of injury or anything like that. Not because of like an injury, devastating injury, something like that. This guy, he simply sat on the sidelines just to get better. He's recently been down at Cerro-Longo, like I mentioned with Sterling earlier. You can't get worse at Cerro-Longo, Jim. But yeah, like I said, he's not been hurt or anything like that. He's simply been getting better. He doesn't come from a martial arts background. That's something he likes to point out. And he spent these past few months training with the best of the best, UFC middleweight champion Chris Weidman, who we'll get to later. And he's just been getting better. So that's something definitely interesting and something I keep in mind when I'm picking this fight. But Paulo, are you going with Theodorou or Thiago Santos?
You know what? It's interesting that you actually mentioned that about Theodorou, because a lot of fighters like to have the opposite approach, and they like to fight as many times as possible, as we see with someone like Neil Magny or Donald Cerrone. I mean, you are in the prime of your career, so I guess they want to maximize that. But what Theodorou is doing is, it's a pretty, I think it can be a pretty smart way, especially if it works in his favor, because when he fights, he usually gets his the way he wins, and he grinds out his opponent. I mean, he has a saying: if you were in a fight, and it looks like you weren't even in a fight, or you were in sweating or nothing like that, then that's how you know you're really doing a good job. And I agree with him. His body's not taking as much damage as he could, and he's preserving himself. He's potentially in for a long career. Now, with that said, I think I'm going to go the other way, and I think he's going to find a way to get Thiago Santos on the ground. But if he can't, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Thiago Santos is just something else, and he's pretty much dispatched of a lot of grinders type of fighters. I mean, against Andy Ants, he killed him pretty fast. We all know that he destroyed 8-1 or 9-1 Hani Marquez, which is one of the craziest effing lines out there. So who knows? Not to say that he's going to come in there and just liver kick Elias and just dispatch of him, but if that happens, man, not going to be surprised at all. But I got Theodorou here.
Yeah, I got to go with Theodorou here. And I should mention I'm really high on Thiago Santos, actually. So I'm looking forward to this fight because I think it'll be a fun matchup. But at the same time, kind of sucks to see one of them lose because I think they both can do well in the 185-pound division. But stylistically, I think Elias Theodorou will take this. He just has to survive the storm, weather the storm in the first round, and then he'll be pretty much good. Thiago Santos doesn't have the best cardio. Elias Theodorou, he does have good cardio. He'll grind out Thiago Santos en route to either a late stoppage, like a late ground and pound TKO, or a unanimous decision, probably 29-28, maybe even 30-27. But I definitely do like the Canadian here by decision for sure. All right, moving on. We have Super Sage Northcutt taking on Cody Pfister. This is Northcutt's second fight in UFC. Daniel, are you going with him, or are you going with the big underdog in Cody Pfister?
Gotta go with Sage Northcutt here. I think that this kid's got a lot of talent. You saw in Embedded where he was in that room with all those trophies that he's won, like over the years with those tournaments. And I mean, this guy's been competing for a long time. And I know he's 19 years old, but he's got a lot of experience. And I think that Pfister's going to be in a lot of trouble here. Pfister's a really tough guy, but this is just a bad stylistic matchup. And I think that Northcutt's going to win either first round knockout or rear naked choke.
All right, Paulo, are you going with the massive favorite here in Sage Northcutt? Most people are. I'm assuming you will. How do you think he gets it done? Or are you going with Cody Pfister? I know I've seen a couple of people pick him. I'm not sure if that's off just hope or if they really think he'll get it done.
You know what? I'm going to be a rebel here and say Cody Pfister's going to win. I'm not even going to explain it. I'm just going to pick it because I want to be cool. And if we see one of these crazy once-in-a-decade upsets, or what? Actually, we just saw one with the Rousey fight. But yeah, if something like that happens, I'm going to be one of the 10 or 11 people to be like, ha, told you guys, Cody Pfister won. That's my only reason for picking Cody Pfister. But I'm actually going to be entering Sage Northcutt everywhere else I pick him. So
I'm gonna be.
So for the show's reason, I'm picking Cody Pfister.
Yeah, I'm gonna be betting Northcutt, but I'm definitely I'm confident in my pick at Cody Pfister. I'm confident. I'm sure that's how that works with picking fights and everything like that. But I gotta go with Sage Northcutt here. I'm not sure if he's a top guy yet. I honestly have faith in him. I think he's gonna be not maybe not a contender, but I think he'll do well in the lightweight division in the future. Right now, he will get past Cody Fisher. There's a reason this matchup was made. Um, like Daniel pointed out, not really a great stylistic matchup for Cody Fisher. No one who isn't an elite fighter is a good matchup or isn't a good matchup for Sage Northcutt in favor of Sage, in my opinion. So I like Sage Northcutt, definitely by stoppage, probably in the first round. I think he gets it done rather quickly. All right, co-main event of UFC Fight Night 80, and it is a fantastic lightweight matchup. Number 14 ranked Jim Miller taking on the rising star in Michael Chiesa. Daniel, are you going with Chiesa, or are you going with the veteran in Jim Miller?
This is another very tough fight to call. You know, obviously Jim Miller, he's a vet, and he almost submitted Benny Dariush, and obviously one doesn't simply submit Benny Dariush, but he didn't do it. But against Michael Chiesa, you know, this is a lesser opponent who has been submitted in the past, so you know, maybe Miller can pull it off, but at the same time, Chiesa is the younger guy. He is the hungrier guy, and that counts for a lot, man. So I'm going to lean with Chiesa here, but if Miller catches him with a slick sub, I'm not going to be surprised one bit.
All right, Paulo, are you going with Chiesa or Jim Miller?
You know, just to add to Daniel's point that he almost submitted Benny Dariush, here's a list of other guys that Jim Miller submitted. Yancy Medeiros, Fabricio Camoes. He beat Joe Lozon and didn't submit him. And he also subbed Charles Oliveira. Once upon a time when Charles Oliveira was still a lightweight, Jim Miller came in there and submitted him when Oliveira was coming off, I think, 2 really crazy submissions and was being dubbed as, oh, this kid is a prospect, this kid's on fire. Then throw him against Jim Miller and he gets his taps out to a leg bar at some point. No, I really want to pick Jim Miller here, though. It's hard to say how he's gonna win, but because Jim Miller, the way Jim Miller fights, he doesn't really have a lot of finishing power on his feet, but he likes to stand and trade at a time. But when it comes to the ground, and Chiesa's much better, but Miller's the veteran, man. And sometimes when you got 2 guys who are not too much better than the other, it's about which fighter shows up and which fighter makes a mistake first.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Michael Chiesa here, and it's a very close matchup. Jim Miller, like you guys pointed out, he could definitely pull off a submission. That's what he's known for doing. Michael Chiesa is a younger, fresher guy though, so that's why I'm picking him. I think he'll be able to keep it on the feet for the most part. If he gets taken down, obviously Jim Miller is a whiz on the ground, but I think Chiesa will be able to keep standing for the most part and use his range and just outpoint Jim Miller in a fairly exciting matchup. I'm not saying this will be fight of the year or anything like that, but I do like Michael Chiesa here. But it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if Jim Miller, the veteran, who's fought the better fighters also. But I do think the guy's on a bit of a decline slowly. Michael Chiesa is on his way up slowly, but I gotta favor the fresher guy in Michael Chiesa. All right, moving on. The main event of UFC Fight Night 80, we have Rose Namajunas taking on Paige Van Zandt in a pivotal women's strawweight matchup. Paulo, are you going with Thug Rose or are you going with 12 gauge Paige Van Zandt?
I'm going with 12 gauge here, and I really want to say confidently, but you can never be too confident in a women's MMA fight. I still have that stance, but I've been betting. Like right now in this fight card, I'm just gonna say right now I have a sizable bet on Paige Van Zandt parlayed with another fighter from UFC 194. We'll talk about later, and I also have her debut opponent Kylan Curran. Now, the way I see this happen, the only thing I can be sure of how this fight's gonna go is that they're both gonna throw bows at some point in there. I know Rose Namajunas is one who like to keep the range, so she can try to pick apart Paige Van Zandt, but I don't think Van Zandt's gonna do that. She's gonna cut off the cage, pressure her, get in clinch with her. Now, there's a good chance if she does that Rose can pull off one of her crazy upsets. I mean, upsets, crazy submissions, like a flying armbar or something. Rose, the thing about her, she's very flexible, right? She's like one of those people, she can just go and try stuff from angles, and she's fearless. She doesn't care. So I want to see how she does against an opponent who constantly pressures her. As we saw her against the Esparza fight, I mean, Esparza sort of laid out a blueprint on how to stop Namajunas. So basically just kept pressuring her, kept getting the takedowns, and eventually she broke and got submitted. Now, that was some time ago. Rose has had a lot of off time to, like, recover and recuperate that way, so she's probably in a better place mentally and maybe has something again, can neutralize the takedowns from Paige Van Zandt, but I'm still going to go with Van Zandt here. Maybe a stoppage sometime down the road, but a decision is also likely.
All right, Daniel, are you going with the slight favorite in Paige Van Zandt, or are you going with Rose Namajunas to get the job done?
A lot of people think that Paige Van Zandt is all hype, but, I think that it's not all hype. I think that she's really relentless. She's got a good pace. She's got a lot of heart, and Rose Namajunas, she's been a very popular underdog pick, but I got to go with Paige Van Zandt here. I think she's going to break her in the later rounds. Rose Namajunas is Pat Barry's girlfriend, and so therefore she'll find a way to lose.
All right. I've been flipping back and forth for this one for a while now. Literally 4 hours ago or so, I was picking someone different than I'm currently picking, and when I heard that they're using the small cage for the Thursday show, I was like, yeah, Paige Van Zandt can definitely win this fight. Initially, I was going with Van Zandt. Then a lot of people were saying, I kind of listened to people saying, talking about how Rose Namajunas could win this fight, keeping distance, whatnot. So I was like, yeah, that's actually a good possibility. So I changed my pick. But now I'm going to go back to what my gut said initially and pick Paige Van Zandt by decision simply because she's going to try, of course, to grab Rose Namajunas and grind her out and maul her on the ground. Will she be able to do that? I think she will be able to in the later rounds. We got to keep in mind, this is a 5-round fight. We haven't seen Paige Van Zandt in a 5-rounder. Rose Namajunas, of course, was scheduled for a 5-rounder in her debut. It didn't go 5 rounds, of course. Carla Esparza got the job done before the last 25-minute bell. Rose Namajunas can definitely use front kicks and whatnot and keep the distance early, and maybe she can do that for the first 10 minutes. Maybe she can make it 2018 going into the 3rd round in favor of Thug Rose. That's definitely possible, but Paige Van Zandt's going to take over in the later rounds. She's going to win the last 3 for sure. She could even win the first 2, or at least one of them or whatever, but I do like Paige Van Zandt here. Stylistically, it's a good matchup for her, and especially with the small cage being used, I'm a bit more confident in that pick of Paige Van Zandt. All right, the next day we have the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale, and it's an interesting card. Right now, there's only 7 fights scheduled officially that we know of. Of course, the TUF fights will be added later this week. And so far, it's a pretty good card, honestly. I want to talk about a welterweight matchup between Ryan LaFleur and Mike Pierce. Mike Pierce is returning to the cage after an over 2-year layoff due to multiple injuries and a prolonged hand injury that I talked to him about. But a definitely interesting welterweight matchup. Daniel, are you going with Ryan LaFleur or Mike Pierce?
This is a tough one to call, Obviously, it could go either way, and on paper, it should go over 2.5 rounds. But oftentimes, when it's like guaranteed to go the distance, it's one of those fights where someone gets knocked out in 30 seconds. But I don't really know which way to lean here. I guess I'm going to lean towards Ryan LaFleur just for the sole fact that Mike Pierce has had all those surgeries, is coming off that long layoff. But I mean, back in his prime, Mike Pierce was a dangerous dude. A lot of people think that he beat John Fitch back when John Fitch was the #1 contender, and a lot of people thought he beat Johnny Hendricks too. So it just depends which Mike Pierce shows up. But I'm gonna go with Ryan LaFleur here.
All right, Paul, are you going with Mike Pierce or Ryan LaFleur in this welterweight matchup?
I'm gonna go with Ryan LaFleur here for similar reasons that Daniel stated, because Ryan LaFleur seems like the fresher fighter. I mean, Mike Pierce hasn't competed a long time. I think the last time Mike Pierce actually competed was the infamous Polaris submission that he refused to let go of that got him fired from the UFC, and eventually still cut what's it called, suspended by the World Series of Fighting. And man, it's just hard because Mike Pierce, a lot of the newer fans probably don't know who he is because he hasn't fought in a while, like I said, and he doesn't really have a style of fighting that makes fans remember him, although he did knock out Aaron Simpson in one of those fights. Mike Pierce only loses to like the upper echelon of fighters. I mean, if you look at his losses, he lost to Koscheck before Koscheck went on a decline. He lost to Johnny Hendricks. John Hendricks is like the former champion. He lost to Fitch, but that was a really close decision. And then he lost to Polaris, who is like knee-barring the crap out of everyone. So it's tough to say, but I'm still gonna go with LaFleur here. I mean, he managed to like not get himself submitted by Damian Maia, so I'd say that's good enough. And that was when Damian Maia was actually really aggressive. So.
Yeah, I got to go with Ryan LaFleur here for similar reasons. I don't have really too much to add. He's a fresher guy. He's a younger guy. Mike Pierce, who knows how he's going to look after multiple injuries. Of course, the knee and ankle injury he suffered on Daniel's birthday against Huzmar Paul Harris. There's that. The hand injury, which has been going on for over a year, which, of course, he's healthy now. But I talked to him, like I mentioned, about that. It was he fractured his hand, and it basically never healed, and so that was going on for a little while, and he's finally healthy, but ring rust is a thing. Who knows how it'll look. I gotta go with Ryan LaFleur. We've seen him fairly recently, more recent than, of course, Mike Pierce, for that matter, but I'm gonna go with Ryan LaFleur, probably for a decision. Alright, moving on, another lightweight matchup that could bring fireworks or an awesome fight on the ground. We have Joe Lozon taking on Evan Dunham in a 155-pound matchup. Paulo, are you going to Joe Lozon or Evan Dunham?
Man, this is a tough fight to call. I really like this fight as a fan. I mean, these guys have been in the UFC for a while, and they've been in there with some of the best. They've been there with guys like Jim Miller, Sean Shirk, Joe Lozon fought Anthony Pettis, and I don't know, they're just two guys who you could always depend on to have like a fantastic fight. I know Evan Dunham's had like a bit of a rough run, but he had like one stretch where he had to fight like Rafael Dos Anjos, Gleison Tebow, Donald Cerrone. I mean, they only get meaningful fights is the reason. And this is hard it's hard to call because it's hard to see where the fight's gonna go. Like you said, like Nick said, if they're gonna stand and trade, that's gonna be a little bit hard because I sort of see them similar in that, although I'd give the edge to Dunham a bit in the striking. And on the ground, I might give the edge to Lozon, but it's hard to see which way they're going to go. Maybe they're going to mix it up. All I really know is that it's going to be an entertaining scrap, but I'm going to go with Dunham here on a split decision.
All right, Daniel, are you going with Joe Lozon or Evan Dunham?
This is going to be a really good fight. And, oftentimes when guys beat Joe Lozon, nowadays they've been beating him by knocking him out. And Evan Dunham's not really a knockout artist. Back in the day, Joe Lozon got beat on the ground, by George Soteropoulos and Kenny Florian, but those days are long gone. And Joe Lozon, he's known for his submissions and how awesome he is on the ground. And I don't think that Evan Dunham brings the knockout power to stop Joe Lozon. So I think that the ground is going to be neutralized, and I think that they're going to stand and bang. And it's going to come down to who has the better hands, and I think that Joe Lozon's got the better hands in this spot, so I'm going to go with the underdog here.
Yeah, I like Joe Lozon here as well, and it's definitely an interesting matchup, and we'll see where these guys are at. They're both on a decline, but it really comes down to who's declining more than the other. Evan Dunham coming off an impressive win over Ross Pearson. Not the most entertaining fight, but it was impressive in the fact that Ross Pearson is a tough guy. But honestly, if you think about it, it was all stylistical. And it was a good matchup for Dunham, a bad matchup for Pearson in that case. But I'm going to go with Joe Lozon, and like Daniel said, they're even on the ground, and they're pretty even on the feet too. Like they're really close in skill at this point in their career. It really comes down to who shows up. Joe Lozon has been out a little while. We'll see how he actually not too long actually. I forgot about his July fight, but it comes down to who shows up more. I think Joe Lozon will, and it really could be anywhere. This fight could take place anywhere. It could be on the feet, on the ground, and either way, it'll be entertaining. But I am going to go with the slight underdog in Joe Lozon. All right, moving on. The co-main event of the TUF 22 finale. What a fantastic fight. Edson Barboza taking on Tony Ferguson. Daniel, I know you're a big fan of El Kakui. Are you picking him to beat the Brazilian?
I am a big fan of El Kakui. You know, I've been high on this guy for a very long time. You know, more than his boxing, more than his jiu-jitsu, the thing I like most about this guy is his championship mindset, his heart, his relentless pace. You know, it doesn't matter if you look prettier than him or if, you know, you kick him really hard. He's going to keep coming forward, and he's going to try to win the fight. And Edson Barboza, you know, he's so dynamic, and that fight with Paul Felder was incredible. Obviously, you know, the kick against Terry Edom, no one had ever done that before at the time. Now you see guys doing that all the time. So, you know, I'd say Edson Barboza is a trendsetter, but, you know, Tony Ferguson, he's got that mindset. So I'm going to favor him here to win the fight.
All right, Paul, are you going with Edson Barboza or Tony El Kakui Ferguson to pick up the biggest win of his career?
I'm going to go with El Kakui here, although Edson Barboza is always dangerous on his feet. Like, I mean, everyone knows that. Like Daniel mentioned, that highlight reel knockout of Terry Edom, which is probably one of the most vicious knockouts ever. I mean, he froze him up like a statue. That's crazy, and I haven't heard from Edom since then. I mean, yeah, no, it's hard. Yeah, El Kakui, like Daniel said, he's gonna keep coming forward, and he's gonna apply so much pressure on Barboza. And then I like to go back to the Michael Johnson fight. Michael Johnson sort of showed how to beat Edson Barboza. Basically, get up close to him, cut off the cage, don't let him get going. Because once you get Edson Barboza in a flow and you start trying to trade like strikes with him, you're likely gonna lose because he's so much more technical and he's got so much more experience in the Muay Thai game and faster. Man, this guy's so fast. I mean, the way he throws those kicks, it's like he throws them with so much power, and yet they're so effortless. I mean, that's crazy. But Ferguson, man, this guy, he could ninja roll his way out of anything, like like against the Josh Thompson fight. So hopefully he doesn't try to get too fancy and try not to like put on too much of a show, and maybe he eats a kick somewhere and gets toasted. But I think he's gonna mix it up. I mean, there's so much on the line for him. He could get a title shot if he wins this fight impressively. I mean, I know lightweight's stacked, but who knows? If he gets a title shot, if he dusts Barboza, I'm not gonna be against that.
Yeah, I've been really high on Edson Barboza for quite a while now, ever since I saw him for the first time, of course, and this is probably the first time I'm going to pick against him, actually. I'm going to go with Tony Ferguson here, and at one point I was like, this guy, maybe he's all right, but definitely not top caliber or anything like that, but this guy, he is a very good fighter, and like Daniel pointed out, I love his mentality. He's all about getting that UFC gold, all about rising the rankings, and this is just another step for him, in my opinion. And I think his movement is going to play a part in the fight. I think he's a bit quicker than Edson Barboza. I think it's going to be a little like the Michael Johnson fight. Maybe not the best fight in the world, although I hope it's going to be a barn burner, and definitely could be. Technically wise, I think it could be a great fight. But I think it's going to look a bit like Johnson or Barboza. I think Ferguson will just be one step ahead of Edson Barboza the entire fight and pick up a close but clear unanimous decision. All right, the main event of the evening, and it seems like every single fight we say, oh, this could be a fight of the night, but honestly, this could be fight of the night, fight of the year. We have Frankie the Answer Edgar taking on Chad Money Mendez in what will probably be a #1 contenders fight at featherweight. Daniel, are you going with Edgar or Mendez?
I'm going with Edgar here. You know, as long as he doesn't get knocked out, he's going to win the fight. He's better everywhere. You know, some people like to say that Edgar is a point fighter, and, you know, I think they're full of it because, you know, Edgar, if you're a true fight fan, then you love Frankie Edgar because, I mean, that series with Gray Maynard where he got dropped about 5 times, then he comes back to knock out Gray Maynard. You know, the fight with Benson Henderson where he gets hit with the up kick and then he comes back and drops him in the 5th round. How can you not love Frankie Edgar? The guy, you know, he won the belt at 155 pounds, and this is a guy that can make bantamweight. And then, you know, he gave Jose Aldo his toughest challenge yet, you know, up until you know, this Saturday with Conor McGregor. But we'll get to that in a bit. But, you know, up until this point, Frankie Edgar has given Jose Aldo's toughest test yet. You know, a lot of people are going to say Chad Mendes did, but if you go back and look at the scorecards for that one, it was all three judges had it 49-46. Frankie Edgar got a 40, what was it, 48-47, so that means it was a closer fight. So, you know, as long as he doesn't get knocked out, I got Frankie the answer Edgar.
All right, Paulo, are you going with Frankie Edgar or Chad Money Mendes?
You know, it's interesting because when this fight first came out, I distinctly remember being on the money train here, and Daniel was already on Frankie Edgar from all the way. So after watching a little bit more tape on them, now I'm starting to realize I don't think Chad Mendes is going to be able to knock out Frankie Edgar, because like when he got dropped repeatedly against Gray Maynard, I mean, he was almost out of his feet. Like his eyes rolled to the back of his head at some point. Yet he still managed to survive despite Gray Maynard being all over him. And I'm like, damn. Like his will to win, his heart, sort of like just gets him past that point when even his body is like, oh man, I can't take this anymore, bro. Time to quit. He just like sort of overpowers that instinct, and he just manages to get up from there. So I think what's going to happen is there's a chance that Chad Mendes is going to rock him really good in the first 3 rounds, and everyone's going to be like, oh my god, this fight's done. Edgar's toast, and Mendes is going to be all over him. But I think Frankie's going to Frankie, man. He's going to recover from that, shake it off, and like take over the last 3 rounds or the last 2 rounds and win a really close judge's decision, maybe a majority decision or something like that. But I think we're going to be in for a really crazy fight. I think Mendes is going to win the earlier rounds, but Frankie's going to take over and just like stop Mendes. And people were saying, and I know a lot of people say that Chad Mendes has a fantastic cardio, and they say, oh, the fight against McGregor, that was 2 weeks' notice, and he ate so much body shots that he got gassed and something like that. But if you remember his fight against Nick Lance, I mean, what was his excuse then? Was he sick or something? Because he didn't look good against Nick Lance in his fight. And Frankie Edgar is so much better of a fighter than Nick Lance. He's a better wrestler, and he's a better striker, and he never stops, man. The only other guy I can think of who never stops other than Frankie is Demetrius Johnson. They're just constantly moving from round 1 to round 5, from the start of the bell until from the start of the fight until the end. He just never stops. So yeah, like Daniel said, if Mendes can't knock out Frankie, I can't see him beating Frankie.
I'm gonna go Chad Mendes here, and I agree with you guys. I don't think he knocks out Frankie the Answer Edgar, and Frankie Edgar is the master at winning decisions. And I know Daniel pointed out all his finishes, but as of late, he has been winning mostly decisions, and obviously that last second Cub Swanson submission, literally given 3 more seconds, it would have been a decision and whatnot. But I'm gonna go with Chad Mendes. I think what it's gonna come down to is his power advantage, and Edgar's striking is a bit more precise. It's and obviously he has a volume advantage overall. But I don't think that's going to matter. I think what's going to matter is Mendes' power. I think he drops Edgar enough where it doesn't matter that Edgar maybe has a few more strikes landed than Mendes. I think Mendes is just going to be able to land the harder shots, not knock out Edgar, but definitely hurt the guy. And lots of people say now, oh, Chad Mendes' cardio is so bad, because all they're remembering is the Conor McGregor fight. Go watch the second Jose Aldo fight, and sure, he didn't look fresh at the end, but they put on the fight of the year of 2014. So go watch that fight, and it's pretty hard to argue that he has bad cardio. Yeah, he didn't have great cardio whatsoever in the Conor McGregor fight in July. He took that fight on very short notice, so it's understandable because he is a thick featherweight. So with that, I'm gonna go with Chad Mendes. I wouldn't be shocked if Frankie wins because it's a close fight, but no matter what, it's gonna be exciting. But I'm gonna go with the slight underdog here by decision. All right, we have the main course to talk about. It is UFC 194, the moment we've all been waiting for. Just the entire card, not just the main event, but I think the whole card is the moment we've all been waiting for. Now, we're going to talk about a few number of fights here, and one fight I want to talk about on the Fight Pass prelims is John Makdessi taking on Yancy Medeiros. And a lot of people are not talking about this fight, and they probably, like, I can't blame them. When you have all the fights you have in the main card, like is of course not going to be talked about, but it's still a fantastic stylistic matchup. So Daniel, are you going with Medeiros or John Makdessi?
I got Yancy Medeiros here all day. I mean, I think that, in Yancy Medeiros' last fight, he came in at 159 pounds. You could see that he was out of shape or he had an injury or something. But if you see the pictures lately, this guy is ripped and shredded, and he's training with Max Holloway. So he's training like a future champion. And in John Makdessi's case, in his last fight, he retired after his last fight. He said he didn't want to fight anymore. So now he's coming back from retirement. Anytime a guy has, 1 foot out the door, I just got to fade them. And, then you consider the fact that Yancy Medeiros is the underdog here. And I got to think he's super hungry after that fight with Dustin Poirier. So I got Yancy Medeiros here for the upset.
All right, Paulo, are you going with Yancy Medeiros or John Makdessi?
You know what? This is one of those fights where I might pick one guy but bet the other guy. From a picks and fantasy perspective, I definitely think you should take a shot on Yancy Medeiros. There's a good chance he could probably finish this fight, although Makdessi's really tough. He's good in a lot of areas, so he could keep the fight where he wants to fight. But two things about Makdessi that's making me really nervous if I was to pick Makdessi, which I am actually. And one is he's coming off a jaw injury. And every time a fighter comes back from a jaw injury, with the exception of Rafael dos Anjos, it's tough, man, because you just had your jaw broken, and Yancy Medeiros, I still think Makdessi's the better striker, but it's just he's not gonna evade all of Yancy Medeiros' strikes. And the second one is Makdessi is such a low volume type of fighter, against that fight against Shane Campbell. Shane Campbell was tuning him up there until he caught him and then just put him away. So, but I'm still going to pick Makdessi here. I think he's going to keep the fight where he wants it. I think it's going to be, it has the potential to be really exciting, but I think it's going to be a Makdessi fight where he's going to outpoint Yancy Medeiros over the course of 3 rounds and win 29-28 split decision or something like that.
All right, I'm going to go against the True North. I'm going to go with Yancy Medeiros in this matchup against John Makdessi. I really like Yancy Medeiros as a fighter. I think his skills are really good. I think he's improving a lot too. John Makdessi, you can't count him out. He looked pretty good against Donald Cerrone, and who was challenging for the title. So he looked overall okay, but he did suffer a broken jaw. And we don't see broken jaws all that often, but look at Eddie Wineland returning, and he didn't look so great. So you can't. You have to think about the broken jaw, the devastating injury. I'm not saying John Makdessi is gonna look different, but I can't say for sure he's gonna look better or the same. And Yancy Medeiros always improving, always getting better. His ground game is very good. His striking is improving. I'm going to go with Yancy Medeiros here. I'm not sure if he stops the fight, but there's definitely a possibility of a submission or something like that. But the safe pick would probably be by decision. All right, moving on. The opening fight on the Fox Sports 1 preliminary card, we have Leonardo Santos taking on Kevin the Motown Phenom Lee. And Daniel, I know you really like Kevin Lee. I'm assuming you're picking him here.
I am picking him here. It's not that big of a surprise. He is a big favorite, but it's not because of the number that I'm picking him. It's the stylistic matchup. I think that Kevin Lee has the tools to defeat Leo Santos. Leo, he's a very tough guy. He's a very underrated guy. Obviously, he's never been officially defeated in the UFC, even though, we all know he lost that Norman Park fight. I don't care what the official book says, but yeah, this is going to be a good fight, but Kevin Lee's going to dominate him everywhere, and he could be the first guy in UFC history to finish Leo Santos. So tune in, guys.
Paulo, are you going with Santos or Kevin Lee?
And not much surprise there. I'm going to go with Kevin Lee. Woo! It's like a crazy pick, right? I'm really trying to break the leg here.
Everybody.
But in the Norman Park fight, just to touch back on what Daniel said, the reason Park lost that fight is because he got a BS point deduction. I think I forgot what it was, but I remember that was in Brazil, and I think he grabbed the cage or he grabbed onto Santos' shorts. Oh yeah, there you go. He grabbed onto his shorts. And was he even warned then? Because I don't remember. I think he just got a BS point deduction because no warning, and the whole Twitter exploded and be like, wow, what is that BS point deduction? And then he lost that round because I mean, he tied that round because of that. But everyone knows that he won that fight 2-1. Now Kevin Lee is like twice better than Norman Park. I think he's a future title contender, and I think he's gonna roll Leo Santos here. I mean, Leo Santos' background is BJJ. That happens to be Kevin Lee, and he's a better striker, better wrestler. Just Kevin Lee wins when Kevin Lee shows up, and that's gonna happen.
Yeah, Kevin Lee's definitely going to show up. I even think if he doesn't show up, if he's one of the worst Kevin Lees we see, I think he beats Leonardo Santos. Santos, yeah, he wins fights, but he's definitely not on the level of Kevin Lee whatsoever. He's going to win this fight. He can win however he wants. He can submit the guy, even though Santos is known for his submissions. He can knock him out, even though Kevin Lee, I don't even think he's ever knocked a guy out. He definitely hasn't in the UFC. I know that for a fact, and he can obviously pick up a dominant decision. Wherever he wants, Kevin Lee is going to win this fight. All right, moving on, we have a very interesting welterweight matchup between Warley Alves, the TUF Brazil 3 winner, which really means nothing at this point of a TUF, taking on Colby Covington, who I know, Paulo, you had on your show, first episode of the MMA Side Dish, so good job to you. Are you going with Covington, Paulo, or Warley Alves?
You know, I've been waiting for a really long while now to lay money on Covington because I'm really confident that he has a good chance to beat Warley Alves here. The thing about this fight is I could see it ending in two ways. I think Warley maybe catches him with a guillotine choke like he's really good at, or he catches him with a kick or punch or something like that, and he ends the fight really early, or Covington manages to like fend off all of that, pull the fight to the ground if he wants to, and win a judge's decision. And I think that's what's going to happen. Now, the only thing that makes me nervous about that is Warley Alves has really good takedown defense. I mean, this guy trains at X Gym with the likes of like Eric Silva and like Jacare, among others. He's an all-around fighter, but his biggest weakness is he has that Eric Silva kind of mold where he starts off really strong and goes in there trying to kill the guy and stuff like that, and then he gasses. Like against that fight against Alan Jouban, that was almost a robbery. I still scored that for Warley Alves, but I know a lot of people scored that for Alan Jouban because what happened was in the first half of that fight, in like the first round and then the first part of the second round, Warley Alves was clearly winning it. He had Alan Jouban in like a guillotine choke at one point, but he gassed after it. He basically just threw away the fight. He didn't do anything for the next rounds. Now up against a fighter like Covington who's going to mix it up and not just stand and trade with him, he's really going to gas if he doesn't finish the fight early. So, but I don't think he can finish Covington. I think Covington's going to win a sound decision, and I'm probably going to put a bet on him while he's still cheap.
All right, Daniel, are you going with the Brazilian or Colby Covington?
You know, on paper, obviously this fight is really close, but the more I think about it, I actually think Warley Alves is going to win. And, you know everyone I know is picking Covington here because of his wrestling, but you know, obviously, like Paulo mentioned, Warley Alves is training out of the X Gym. Those guys train their wrestling all the time, and you know, I think that Warley Alves has fought a better level of competition. I thought he lost that fight against Jouban, but you know, another thing that I think is that he made big improvements after that fight. That fight against Taleb, I was very impressed with Warley Alves' performance. It looked like he made some big improvements. You know, his pacing was way better, and so I think he's going to have the better cardio here. And you know, he might get taken out. He might get taken down and grinded, but I just don't see it happening here, man. I think Warley Alves is going to catch him somewhere along the way. So, give me Warley.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Warley Alves here as well. And like Daniel mentioned, I was really impressed with his last performance at UFC 190 in August against Nordine Taleb. Really impressive from him. He picked up that first round stoppage, I believe. Might have been second round, but very good performance from him. And I actually scored that Alan Jouban fight. It was close, so really could have gone either way. And I don't think I ever rewatched it, so I can't say, oh, I watched it 5 times and I scored it for Alves every time. But when I watched it live, I did score it for Alves, I know. And I'm in the majority for that one, I know for sure. But matchup-wise, Covington, yeah, he could grind out Warley Alves, but this guy's really good on the ground. I don't see that happening. I think he'll be able to stuff the takedowns more or less. Covington, he looked really good in his first couple fights, but against Mike Pyle, who yes is a tough opponent, but he's definitely on the decline. I don't think Covington looked all that great, honestly. He relied on his wrestling a lot in that matchup. I don't think his striking is on point. I think Worley Alves is a bit more well-rounded. He's improving a bit quicker than Covington, in my opinion. But they are both undefeated for a reason, and I do think Worley Alves will be the one to keep his 0 after this is all said and done. All right, moving on, we have number 5 women's strawweight Tecia Torres taking on UFC newcomer Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger. Paulo, are you going Torres or Jones-Lybarger?
You know, if this fight wasn't a short notice replacement fight for Lybarger, I might be inclined to take a shot at Lybarger, because the way Lybarger fights from the few fights that I've seen her on is it's sort of like Tecia Torres. She sort of maintains that, she sort of like just keeps coming forward and keeps applying pressure on her opponent until she breaks her opponent. And she's a really tough girl too. And it's not like Tecia Torres is gonna finish her. I mean, I don't think Tecia Torres has finished anyone in her pro career.
Mm-hmm.
Like she finished a couple of fights in the amateur leagues, but yeah, it's going to be a decision, and I think Torres is going to win at least 2 of the 3 rounds, probably mix up her striking, get Lybarger on the ground, and like keep her there, control the fight, and win it. There's a chance that they could brawl. I'm hoping that's the best case scenario as a fan, that they're just going to go in there and say, screw it, let's just brawl. And if that happens, I think Lybarger might actually win there, but nah, I don't think so. I think Torres is just going to, fight the conservative way, mix up her striking, mix up her takedowns, keep Lybarger down, and keep herself out of trouble. And I think it's going to be like 29-28 Torres.
All right, Daniel, are you going Torres or Jones-Lybarger for the upset?
I've known Tecia Torres for a very long time. Actually, I used to train with her at Knuckle Up, and, Paulo was saying, they might get into a brawl. There's no chance they're going to get into a brawl. Tecia Torres will never brawl. She is strictly a point fighter. That's what she's been her entire career, and that's what she is now. But one thing that you got to give her credit for is that she finds a way to win. So, she's going to find a way to win here, but it's not going to be exciting at all.
I agree with you. Everything you said makes sense. Tecia Torres, I was actually going to fade her against Michelle Waterson, but of course the Karate Hottie was forced out of the matchup with a injury. But against Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger, I don't think I know absolutely nothing about her, and even if she is like a future contender, debuting against the number 5 ranked women's strawweight is not the prettiest debut for someone wanting to move up. Well, if she's gonna win, yeah, she's gonna move the ranks fast, but it's definitely not an easy debut. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. But Tecia Torres will most likely grind her out, lie on top of her for about 15 minutes, and grind out most likely a 30-27 unanimous decision victory. But it won't be pretty, won't be exciting. All right, moving on. Uriah Faber taking on Frankie Saenz in the headliner of the Fox Sports 1 prelims. Daniel, are you going to California Kid or Frankie Saenz for the massive upset?
So, on paper, obviously, you have to pick Uriah Faber because, Uriah is obviously, he's never lost a non-title fight, except for the Edgar fight. But, we all know that Edgar's a former champion, but he's never truly lost a non-title fight. But here's the thing. I know for a fact that he got up for that Frankie Edgar fight. I mean, everyone's super motivated when they're fighting Frankie Edgar. And I know for a fact that, this fight against Frankie Saenz, he's probably taking it a little lighter than he was the Frankie Edgar fight. I know that for a fact. Now, Uriah Faber should win the fight, but when you see odds like plus 500, and I know on fight day it's going to be plus 1,000, if you're of age, it might be worth taking a flyer just because I said over a year ago that Uriah Faber's on the decline. I didn't think he looked good in the Scott Jorgensen fight. I didn't think he looked good in the Bruce Leroy or the Francisco Rivera fight. And, obviously he showed up for Frankie, but you got to show up for Frankie. So I'm talking about Frankie Edgar. But I don't think he's going to show up for Frankie Saenz as much. So I'm going to go with the underdog here. I'm going to be bold.
All right, Paulo, are you going with Uriah Faber here? I believe he's a sizable favorite in this matchup. I don't have the exact odds in front of me, or are you going with the upset in Frankie Saenz?
You know what? I'm not gonna go with the upset here. I don't have as much uh, cojones as Daniel here, but I agree with everything he said. Uriah Faber, he's on the decline, and there's a chance that he's likely gonna take science to decision. And we all know that these judges, man, if you make the fight close enough, they're gonna find a reason to give it to the guy who may not have won. And if that happens, if it goes to a decision and you could at least say, oh yeah, Faber clearly won 2 rounds, and then one round was close. You didn't really know who to score it for. You never know. Maybe two judges says, oh no, mate, Frankie Saenz won 2 rounds and screw Faber out of a decision. So this is definitely a fight not worth betting on, and Faber is just getting steamed to death. He's like at minus 750 at 5 dimes, and that's crazy, man. I'm not betting that for sure. I mean, Faber to win in the distance is plus 108, which if you're a big Faber fan, you might want to take that, but and Faber's only like won 2 fights by decision, and I think that's against Yuri Alcantara, who Frankie Saenz beat, and Eddie Wineland, who fought for the title and was the former champion. So if Faber's going to win, he's probably going to catch Saenz in something, but I think Saenz is really tough, really well versed enough in jiu-jitsu and wrestling that he's going to make it to decision, but I still think Faber wins, maybe a 29-28 scorecards.
I like Uriah Faber here, and similar to his past couple fights, of course, minus the Frankie Edgar fight, it's another one of those Uriah Faber declining, but taking on a prelim guy top 15 at best. It's just going to be another submission or maybe even knockout, probably most likely submission victory or decision. Frankie Saenz is a very tough fighter, but I like Uriah Faber here. I think he gets it done. I think he's better ever. Yes, I do think he's declining. I don't think he beats the best of the best. But Frankie Saenz, he's a rising star. He's an interesting stylistic matchup for a California kid. But you got to go with Uriah Faber. He's fought better fighters. He's been in the game for a while. And Frankie Saenz, he's up and coming for sure. But I don't think he's at the level of the California kid. So I'm going to go with Uriah Faber with a mid-round submission. Alright, moving on, the opening fight on the main card, we have Max Blessed Holloway taking on Jeremy Stephens, and what a matchup this will be. Daniel, are you going to Holloway or Jeremy Stephens?
What a matchup it'll be indeed, but it's really what a showcase it'll be. I think that Max Holloway is going to really show that, he's ready to contend for that title. And I know that might sound crazy to some, but I'm here going on paper, on before the battle, saying that Max Holloway is going to be a UFC champion. So, yeah, I think he's not going to have a problem with Jeremy Stephens at all. People talk about Jeremy Stephens' power. He hasn't knocked anyone out with his hands since 2011. He's not going to catch Max Holloway with a flying knee or a head kick or anything like that. I think Max Holloway is going to light him up and either 30-26 him or finish him with a TKO.
All right, Paulo, are you going with Max Holloway, the big favorite here, or Jeremy Little Heathen Stephens?
What's up, Paulo?
Your mic is muted.
Hey, so it's a really good fight. I wonder what Paulo thinks.
Yeah, I wish we could get Paulo's opinion on this one. Max Holloway, Jeremy Stephens could be fight of night, but
I'm gonna go on a flip and guess that he's picking Max Holloway here.
No, I'm gonna say he's picking Jeremy Stephens because he just picks underdogs to pick underdogs, basically.
Like my boy Val Turdo that's watching this fight, that's watching this show.
Yeah, I know. That's all he does, honestly. Did he pick Holly Holm?
Yeah, he's my biggest fan.
Yeah.
So shout out to Val Turdo.
Yeah, exactly.
I always got love for my fans, and I'm always down for my fans. If they want to reach out to me, Val Turdo. I'll sign anything you want to send me, Val.
Yeah, no kidding. And my signature, Daniel's signature, Paulo's signature, all on one sheet or something worth millions.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, here's the thing I like about Max Holloway. It's that, every single fight, he's really been evolving. Before a lot of people had issues with his ground game, but now he's tapping guys out. He's tapping out black belts. And, you know, the thing with Charles DuBronx Oliveira tried to say that he had a torn esophagus, and then the very next week on UFC Tonight, it came out that he didn't have a torn esophagus. So, you know, a lot of people in that circle are saying that DuBronx might have quit in that fight, and that's a result of what Max Holloway was doing to the body. So, you know, Max Holloway's going to chop down Jeremy Stephens here too.
Now, what do you say to someone that says, "Oh, Max Holloway's way too young for a title shot"? Because I'm pretty sure I know what you're gonna say. I agree with you. I think he's definitely ready. I think he's one of the better fighters, one of the best in the featherweight division.
I'd say that they don't know what the hell they're talking about, because, I mean, just because he's young doesn't mean that he's not experienced. He's super mature for his age. I mean, the guy's married with kids. You know what I'm saying? This guy is not your typical 23-year-old. He's very mature for his age, and it shows in all his fights. He's taking out guys that have been fighting way longer than he has, and he's doing it in very impressive fashion. I mean, he went the distance with Conor McGregor when he was 19 years old. I mean, this kid, I'm just so impressed with Max Holloway. The only time, you know, he's truly lost was to Dustin Poirier when he was like 17 or 18, and he's made big improvements since then. So I just can't wait to see what he does on Saturday night, Nick.
All right, Paulo, are you back?
Am I back? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome back to Before the Battle.
Yeah, okay, anyway,
taking the time.
Y'all pretty much covered it up, but there's actually an interesting prop right now. Holloway by decision is -102. Now, I think there's still a chance he finishes Stephens, but I think Stephens is just one of those really tough guys, man. And if Max Holloway wins, it'll be by accumulation of strikes, but I don't think Stephens is going to quit. Even if he's getting brutally beat down, he's going to stay in there and try to fight, I don't know, maybe to a losing decision. But Holloway by decision is -102. That's really interesting.
I think Max Holloway finishes his fight, but I agree. Jeremy Stephens is a very, very tough guy. I don't think Holloway knocks him out. Now, like, initially I was talking about this fight on my other podcast, MMA Junior Radio, a couple of days back. I was thinking, yeah, there's no way he's going to knock Jeremy Stephens out. I still think that I think it's unlikely that he KOs Stephens because he's a durable fighter, but he can look a lot like the Cub Swanson fight. Just beat the crap out of the guy on the feet and then go for that submission in the later rounds. I think that's probably what's going to happen.
No, I think Stephens is going to stay in there. But no, if he finishes him, then, okay, you know what? It's MMA. We can't be too shocked these days. But I think Stephens makes it to the distance, even if it's like 30-26s across the board or something.
All right.
Oliveira couldn't submit him, man. Like, how would Holloway submit? Like, Oliveira almost snapped his arm off and had him choked out, and he still wouldn't quit. Like, come on. Like, Stephens is just tough as hell. And he was in a war with Bermudez, too. You know, Bermudez is not exactly the biggest finisher, but I think he got bloodied up in that fight and just kept coming and landed that flying knee. So I think Holloway still wins comfortably, but I think Stephens, like stays in there. And I think Holloway's going to respect that power at some point, so...
All right, we'll see what happens. But moving on, we have another fantastic matchup stylistically, a welterweight matchup between Damian Maia and Gunnar Nelson. Daniel, are you going with Gunnar Nelson or Damian Maia?
Once again, I'm going with the underdog. You know, I really like Gunnar Nelson in this matchup. Oftentimes when Damian Maia goes out there and dominates guys on the ground, it's guys that, you know, don't really have a good jiu-jitsu game. You know, obviously Ryan LaFleur is a wrestler, but he doesn't have very high-level jiu-jitsu, and if there's one thing that Gunnar Nelson does have is high-level jiu-jitsu. I mean, this guy went to the finals in the Absolute in the Abu Dhabi. That means that, you know, he was going up there against heavyweights, and this is a guy that walks around at 175 pounds. So, you know, he's very well-versed on the ground. So I think the ground aspect of this fight is going to be neutralized, and it's going to be played out on the feet, where I think Gunny Nelson is actually going to knock out Damian Maia.
All right, a bold prediction from Mr. Best Fight Picks over here. Paulo, are you going with Gunny Nelson or Damian Maia?
I'm going to go with Gunny here. Even when this fight was made, I was already sold that Gunny was going to win it. But Damian Maia, like, you can't ever say that this guy always has a chance in a fight just because of his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. He's one of the best, maybe top 5 in the UFC, arguably, if not top 3. And if he gets it to the ground, which I think which I don't think is going to happen, and I think it's going to be a striking affair. But if he does get it to ground, I'll favor him there slightly. He's just relentless, man. And I mean, but Gunny is like, he's also a prodigy when it comes to jiu-jitsu, and as he showed in the fight against Thatch, now in that fight, I actually bet Brandon Thatch. I thought Thatch was going to keep the fight standing, and he's going to like wipe out Gunny. What does Gunny do? He knocks him down. I mean, that's crazy. That was one of the more underrated things that happened at 189 that sort of flew under the radar just because of how crazy that card was. But when he like knocked Brandon Thatch down, I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And then obviously when he knocked him down, it was over from there. He just took his back and just submitted him. But no, the fight's going to stay standing, and I think he's going to pick apart Maia under feet, even though I think Maia's going to outvolume him because he does tend to maintains that aggressive mentality, even though his striking isn't really the best. But, you know, maybe he becomes the second guy to knock out Maia after Nate Marquardt.
All right, I am going to go against you guys. I'm going with the slight favorite here, Damian Maia. And, yes, I often use the argument of this guy is fresher, this guy is younger, and that is true for Gunnar Nelson. But I'm going to go against my argument and say that doesn't matter in this matchup. I just think Damian Maia, yes, on the feet, Gunnar Nelson's a bit better, but I don't think it's going to be on the feet. I think Damian Maia will be able to take it down to the ground. I think Damian Maia is better on the ground than the Gunnar Nelson, of course. But Gunnar Nelson's getting better each and every day. We haven't seen him for a little while. We haven't seen Maia for a little while. I expect Gunnar to be better, to be more improved, and to have made more improvements than Damian Maia has since his last fight. But no matter, with that being said, I'm going to go with Damian Maia. I'm not sure if he stops Gunnar Nelson, but Damian Maia, once the guy gets his opponent on the ground, it's tough to not get a finish by him. But I'll go against the grain to say this goes the distance because it's a 3-rounder. But I wouldn't be shocked if we see a submission or even a knockout from a Gunnar Nelson. But final pick is Damian Maia by decision. All right, moving on. And this is the fight I've been waiting for so long. It was supposed to happen back in February, UFC 184. I believe that was it was in the same spot, third last fight, because that was when Weidman Belfort was also supposed to happen. Rousey was in the co-main. Then Jacare got ill, actually. Wasn't even an injury. So he pulled out of that. Romero was taken off that card. And then they were rescheduled for UFC on Fox 15 in April. And then it was Romero's time to get hurt. And Chris Camozzi, of course, fills in. What a fight that was. And then Romero picks up a big win a couple months after that against Lyoto Machida. Still happening. It still makes sense. Jacare Souza taking on Yoel Romero in a #1 middleweight contenders matchup. Daniel, are you going with Romero or Jacare Souza?
I'm going with Yoel Romero. You know, I've picked him in every single one of his fights, and you know, for some reason, he's always the underdog, which is awesome. But yeah, I'm picking him here again. And you know, here's the thing with Jacare is, man, you know, he's gotten a lot better over time. And you know, he used to just be a jiu-jitsu guy, but now he's knocking guys out. But I don't think he's got the, you know, UFC resume that Yoel does. Yoel's been fighting better guys inside the octagon, and I think that we've seen a lot of weakness in Jacare's game. You know, if he can't overpower you in the first round, you know, he's not the same guy. You watch that second round with Francis Carmon, and I mean, dude, Francis Carmon won that second round, and if he fights anything like that with Yoel Romero, he's going to be in big trouble. So I think Yoel Romero's going to knock him out in the third round.
All right, Paulo, are you going with Jacare Souza or are you going with Yoel Romero to pick up the biggest victory of his career?
You know what? It's interesting because that's an interesting thing that Daniel just said, that Yoel Romero in the third round by knockout, because I think he, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't he have like the most third round finishes right now in the UFC? Because from what I can remember, he finishes everyone in like the third round. I mean, it still surprises me how someone like Brad Tavares, of all people, was the one that he couldn't finish in the third round. But he was almost finished. He was like, the guy was all beat up and bloodied, and I was like, oh, geez, he's definitely getting killed. But he just toughed it out there. It just goes to show the Hawaiian fighting spirit. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with Romero with Jacare here, but I'm not at all super confident about that. I don't think I'm going to make a bet in this fight. I just think he's just the better fighter all around, man. He's just a better grappler. I mean, Yoel Romero, obviously, he's a beast. He's a former Olympian. But if you watch that fight against Derek Brunson, man, he was getting taken down nonstop. Derek Brunson was winning that fight and beating up Yoel Romero until he caught him. But I don't know. I think Jacare's not going to let him off the hook. I think once he gets him on the ground repeatedly, he's going to find a way to submit him at some point. Although if Romero knocks out Jacare, and both their chins are, to me, not that good. So if Romero catches him, he can put him out. But I think Jacare's going to win the grappling exchanges on the ground. I think Jacare's going to win this fight, probably by decision or a stoppage somewhere.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Paulo here. I'm going to go with Jacare Souza to defeat Yoel Romero. And it'll be interesting if Yoel Romero wins, because I always like his post-fight speeches, of course. But matchup-wise, I think Jacare takes it. I think he's obviously Yoel Romero can finish absolutely anybody. He's one of the best middleweights out there. Like Daniel, I've been super high on the guy. I've picked him in every fight of his I've watched, and that's been quite a few. Jacare Souza, again, very high on him. I've picked him in, like most people, I've picked him in, I think, every fight he's had in UFC that I've watched. I just can't wait for this fight. I hope no one loses, but it's not going to be a draw. So Yoel Romero is going to lose this fight, but it's going to be close. It's going to be competitive. It's an interesting fight, though. Jacare Souza should be able to take him down, but you never know. Yoel Romero improving every day, and that's really all I have to say about that fight. Other than the fact that if this was a 5-rounder, I'd be a bit more confident in Jacare, because Yoel Romero doesn't have the best gas tank, although it's been, I haven't been too much of a critic of it. I think he has relatively good cardio, but by the 3rd round, he's looking a bit tired, and I wouldn't want to see Yoel Romero in the 4th or 5th round, so thankfully for him, it's better that it's a 3-rounder. Jacare, if it's a 5-rounder, he probably stops Yoel Romero. 3-rounder, I think it goes a distance, but I think Jacare picks up a 29-28 decision victory. And Daniel, you had something to add, correct?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to comment on, the whole Derek Brunson taking him down thing. My buddy Pat Wyman put out a tweet today that apparently Yoel Romero didn't even train his MMA wrestling up until after the Brunson fight, and he hasn't been taken down a single time since.
We'll see what happens, and I like both guys, but it'll be an interesting matchup. Like I said, very close. I'm excited for it. It will be a fantastic scrap. All right, championship fight time. Chris Weidman, the middleweight champion, taking on Luke Rockhold. And what a scrap this will be. Daniel, are you going with Weidman to retain his championship belt? Or, like I like to say, are you going with Luke Rockhold to gain the championship belt?
I like Chris Weidman to retain. I think that, Luke Rockhold has been looking more scary than ever. He's been really improving every single fight. He's been making veterans look like they don't know what they're doing. Guys like Bisping, guys like Machida, guys that have been in the game for a very long time. He's just going out there and destroying them. But you know what? You know who else has been doing that? Chris Weidman. And I think that, Chris Weidman's never been knocked out. Luke Rockhold's been knocked out 2 times in his career. That means he can be knocked out a 3rd time also. So, the first couple rounds might be kind of tough, but at some point, Chris Weidman's going to find the chin of Luke Rockhold, and he's going to knock him out and still be the UFC middleweight champion of the world.
All right, Paulo, are you going with Chris Weidman to retain his middleweight championship, or will Luke Rockhold become the new middleweight champion and the first to defeat Chris Weidman in his pro career?
You know what? I still have a hard time making a pick here, because maybe I really like both of them so much, because they're just these 2 guys who have been on a roll and they're at the prime of their career. And I mean, Weidman is the champion now, but Rockhold was like the champion in Strikeforce, and he beat guys like Tim Kennedy and Jacare, who are both contenders right now in the UFC. So I mean, Luke Rockhold has been in there, has that championship pedigree in him too, man. But the thing is, I don't think I've ever seen him in like a 5-round war or like has been in there like crazy like Chris Weidman has. I mean, he was in a really close fight with Jacare, but in my opinion, he was winning that fight 4 out of 5. He was winning 4 out of 5 rounds of that fight pretty handily. But I really just want to see what it's gonna look like when they've both like felt each other out. They've probably exchanged punches at some point, and then they're both like bloodied and stuff. And maybe it might end up being like the what's it called, the Lawler and McDonald fight, where it's just crazy. They're just going at it back and forth. And this fight is really under the radar. Not a lot of people are talking about it. So who knows? Those two guys are going to come in there and put on a show. All I know is that it's going to be a really close fight, and I think Weidman's going to get rocked at some point down the road. What's really interesting to me is the fight goes the distance in over 3.5 props right now. Now they're both like set at a really low price, so people are expecting either guy to finish the other. I'm thinking that they're both guys who just have this alpha mentality and are tough as crap, and they're just going to come in there and beat each other up real good, 5-round war or 4-round war.
All right, I am going with Luke Rockhold to become the new UFC middleweight champion. The thing with Chris Weidman is, I just yes, he's very good. He's a very good fighter, very well rounded. His wrestling could be the biggest factor in this matchup. Maybe he can take Luke Rockhold down whenever he wants and grind out a decision. But I don't see that happening. I think Luke Rockhold will be able to keep this on the feet and simply outpoint Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman, the thing with Chris Weidman is he beat Anderson Silva, looked good doing so, of course, but people seem to forget, and I know people hate when people say this about Chris Weidman, but Anderson Silva was literally at the end of his career. He didn't look the same against Nick Diaz, and Nick Diaz is no Chris Weidman. That was probably mostly the leg injury, of course, but you never know. Anderson Silva, just not the same fighter that he was several years ago. Then he defends his title against Lyoto Machida. Great defense. He wins by decision. But then, if you look at it when Luke Rockhold demolishes Lyoto Machida, was it all that impressive? And then Vitor Belfort. You can't take anything away from Chris Weidman for that win. It was a very good win. But Vitor Belfort off a TRT, he can beat Dan Henderson, but I'm not so sure he's a contender or the best of the best. Chris Weidman, very good fighter. He can beat lots of fighters, but I just get this sense that he's become overrated, and I hate calling him overrated because he's still a great fighter. He's a champ for a reason, but I think he got into the sport at the right time. He fought for the belt at the right time. He defended against the right people. But then when he goes against someone in his prime, because Vitor, Lyoto, and Anderson were all not in their prime when they fought Weidman. When Chris Weidman goes up against Luke Rockhold, who's in his prime, I think we see that Chris Weidman, he's a very good fighter. He beats most of the top 5, top 10. But I think we see he's not the best of the best. I think Luke Rockhold finishes Chris Weidman. All right, moving on. The main event of UFC 194. We've been waiting for it for a while, and it's finally happening. Jose Aldo, UFC featherweight champion, and UFC interim champion Conor McGregor unify the 145-pound title in the most anticipated fight of the year, biggest featherweight title fight ever. Daniel, you're going Conor McGregor, you're wearing the shades, you're all Irish in this one. Tell us why right here, right now, on Before the Battle.
Yeah, and new. It's going to be a very good moment this Saturday night. You know, obviously Jose Aldo, he's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. He's been undefeated for 10 years. He's beat every single person they put in front of him in the UFC and the WEC. And, you know, he's absolutely incredible. His leg kicks, his flying knees, his punches, everything he brings to the table is really good. But, you know, like every single long-reigning champion, there comes that time when finally they've met their match, you know. With Anderson Silva, it was Chris Weidman. which ESP was Johnny Hendricks. I don't care what anyone says about that decision. With Barao, it was TJ Dillashaw. You know what I mean? So everyone just finds that matchup that, that person that has their number, and I think that Conor McGregor has Jose Aldo's number. Up until this point, Jose Aldo's been fighting these short wrestlers, which, Chad Mendes, Frankie Edgar, they are great fighters, but this is a completely different stylistic matchup. Obviously McGregor is a southpaw, and if you talk about Aldo's main weapon, which is the leg kick, that's going to be very hard to land against the southpaw because Conor McGregor can either check the kick or he can counter back with a straight left. On the flip side, Aldo's big weapon in this fight should be the right hand, because if there's one punch that a southpaw is susceptible to, it is that right hand. So I think that Conor McGregor is going to be aware of that. And, here's another thing I want to talk about, Nick. Oftentimes a lot of people criticize Jose Aldo for the fact that he went to the gas after the second round. That's been their criticism of him. A lot of people faded him in the second Chad fight. But now that Conor McGregor's talk is so damn good, everyone is, conveniently forgetting their past criticisms of Jose Aldo. But I haven't forgotten. I think, as the fight goes down, he will slow down. And, Conor McGregor is either going to knock him out or he's going to win a very dominant decision and become the new featherweight champion.
All right, Paulo, best fight of the year, most anticipated fight of the year, Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo. Who do you got?
It's funny how this fight is, especially if you poll people on this, because come on, the Conor McGregor effect, if you support Conor McGregor and you elaborate a lot of reasons, even if they're logical reasons, just logical likely scenarios, just like Daniel explained, you're automatically branded like a Conor McGregor fan, like a fanboy or something like that, and you're going to be like, nothing you say can ever be trusted instead, because you're falling for the hype, as they like to say. And then on the flip side of that, if you say Conor McGregor he's being spoon-fed by the UFC, a product of another hype machine, and then all of a sudden you're like a Conor McGregor hater, so nothing you say can ever be taken as seriously as well. So it's really hard to say, but I think the middle line is that Conor McGregor is just a best stylistic matchup for Aldo. I mean, Aldo's going to have to pull off this mythical wrestling Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background that a lot of people keep talking about Aldo, and expose McGregor on the ground and maybe submit him there if he gets the fight to the ground. But if he tries to make a point and stand and trade with McGregor, I think he's going to get knocked out. McGregor has the length advantage, the reach advantage, I should say. He has the better one-punch knockout power, and he has a chin, man. Chad Mendes was throwing bombs at him, and he was just clocking him real good. If you remember, Chad Mendes knocked down Jose Aldo and wobbled and rocked him a couple of times in their fight, but he didn't even graze McGregor. The most damage he did was when he was on top and was throwing elbows in McGregor's forehead. But before that, McGregor was basically butchering him on the feet, and Mendes was hitting him, but he wasn't really rocking him. That's why McGregor was letting him hit him. So if Jose Aldo tries to prove a point and stands in trade with McGregor, I think it's going to end badly for him. I think he's going to try to mix it up and take McGregor to the ground, which is probably his best chance of winning. And I'm not sure he's going to do that. So unfortunately, it's been a good run for Aldo. He's arguably the best ever featherweight to have. No argument. He's the best featherweight right now in the sport there is, but I think he's passing on the torch to Conor McGregor.
All right, I am going to complete the hat trick. We will hear and new twice at UFC 194. I think Conor McGregor will defeat Jose Aldo, but I'm not confident whatsoever. Jose Aldo, big advantage on the ground, and I don't think, if he was smart, he would take down Conor McGregor, and he can at will. If he was smart, he would do so and grind out a decision and remain the champion. He would pick up a 50-45, but I don't think he's gonna do that. Even though he's the best of the best, even though he's pound for pound number one, I think he wants to prove a point for whatever reason and stand with Conor McGregor, and that is when it's going to go wrong for Jose Aldo. Conor McGregor, people say, yeah, he doesn't check kicks, so Jose Aldo, his nasty kicks, is going to He's gonna blow Conor McGregor's legs out from under him. Blah blah blah. Definitely possible. I'm not counting that out, but I don't think that's gonna happen. I'm banking on that. I think Conor McGregor he is a left hand. I think he is a striker. He's gonna play a factor in this matchup. I think he's gonna knock out Jose Aldo and be the first in the UFC or Zuffa to finish Jose Aldo, be the first fighter ever to knock out the number one pound for pound fighter. So that does it. UFC 194, TUF 22 finale, and UFC Fight Night 80. Before we get to our counter move teams, Daniel, any last words, anything you want to say to the listeners about any three of the events?
Just what I opened with is just I can't believe it's finally here. We've been waiting so long for this fight. And, do you guys know if Jose Aldo's touched down on U.S. soil yet?
I am not sure.
Yeah, so fingers crossed, guys. We might be seeing Frankie Edgar versus Conor McGregor this weekend. But all jokes aside, I can't wait for McGregor versus Aldo. It's truly going to be such a good fight. I mean, the number one pound for pound fighter on planet Earth, undefeated for 10 years, versus the notorious Conor McGregor. I cannot wait, Nick. And Paulo.
Yeah, don't forget Paulo, even though he ditched us. Paulo, anything else you want to say before we head over to our counter move teams and wrap this up?
I just want to see that it's going to be enjoy this week, man, because honestly, I know we still have a fight card coming down next week, but come on, man, 3 straight UFC fights. I'm not sure if they're going to do this again next year. This might be the only time where we're going to see this, and as an MMA fan, this is it, man. This is like the best of what we're getting. And I know UFC 189 was a super stacked card, and it's going to be incredibly hard to top that one, but just come on, man. I don't need to explain myself as an MMA fan. This is 3 straight nights, and I'm like, whew, man, this is gonna be like binge drinking for an MMA fan equivalent of. So
hey,
that's all
you can't talk about binge drinking with Nick in the room, bro.
Okay, but feeding stuffing yourself with junk food throughout the whole night with Candyland, what have you, whatever vice you want. That's what it is, and I just want to say that it's so much to wrap your head around.
I agree. For a moment there, you're sounding like this was the last UFC event ever, so cherish it and enjoy it. But yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely going to be a fantastic weekend. And I don't have anything else to say. Just tune in, watch the fights. I know you will. You're definitely going to watch 194. You're probably going to watch the finale, and you might catch the first card. But all 3 cards are great. Even the Van Zandt and Namajunas card is not too bad. You have lots of prospects on the card. When Aljamain Sterling is on the prelim card, it's not too bad of a fight night card, especially when it's basically serving as the appetizer of the fantastic fights we have on a Saturday night. Now, before we wrap it up, our counter move teams. Daniel, who are your 5 fighters for UFC 194 on your counter move team?
I got the new champion, Conor McGregor. I got the future champion, Max Holloway. I got the future title contender, Yoel Romero. I got the other future title contender, Gunny Nelson. And I got the very tough Yancy Medeiros.
All right, Paulo, who do you have for UFC 194 on your counter move team?
Mine's not done yet, so I might change this up a little bit. But I've got Colby Covington, I've got Kevin Lee, I've got Gunnar Nelson, and I've got Jacare. Oh wait, that's only 4 guys, right? And I got Court McGee.
All right, and my counter move team, I have a couple here, is Damian Maia to pick up possibly a submission over Gunnar Nelson, maybe a decision. I got Luke Rockhold and New to stop Chris Weidman. I got Yancy Medeiros to stop John Makdessi. I got Max Holloway to stop Jeremy Stevens, and I got Warley Alves to stop Colby Covington. And I'm going to go ahead and say my Fight Night 80 counter team. Daniel, Paulo, if you have them, you can go right after this. But my UFC Fight Night 80 counter team is we have Tim Means to stop, to TKO, to knockout, whatever. John Howard, Michael Chiesa to pick up a close decision over Jim Miller. I got Omari Akhmedov to stop. I can't even remember his opponent. But he's going to pick up the stoppage. Santiago Ponzinibbio going to stop his fight. And Paige Van Zandt to pick up a dominant win over Rose Namajunas. Now, Daniel, do you have a Fight Night 80 team?
I do. I got Tim Means, Tukhugov, Johnny Eduardo, Thiago Santos, and Sage Northcutt.
All right. And Paulo, what about you?
Okay, I've got Paige Van Zandt to hopefully take it 5 rounds and finish Rose eventually after landing a UFC record significant strikes. Hopefully, I got Santiago Ponzinibbio, I'm a big fan of. I've got Kylie Curran to beat the crap out of Emily Kagan, maybe a finish. I got Michael Graves, and surprisingly, Michael Chiesa is cheaper than Jim Miller on counter moves, so I picked Michael Chiesa.
Michael Graves is out of the fight.
Damn, this is how outdated this thing is. So in that case, I'm going to get Cara de Zapato then at similar price at 4,800.
All right, there we go. And
or Danny Roberts.
And I have one more I want to say. Jacare, Uriah Faber-Yancey, Gunnar Nelson. And Gunnar Nelson, I'm putting him in there because I think it's close. And Tisha Torres, so we'll see what happens. All right. This has been, let me check the time. We've been 1 hour and 1.5 hours. A little more than usual. Makes sense. Broke down 3 cards. But yeah, UFC 194. It's going to be great. TUF Finale is going to be a great card as well. And the appetizer Fight Night 80. Tune in as well. Now, Daniel, thanks for coming on. As always, let us know where the listeners find you on social media. And let us know what you got coming up with the Best Fight Picks.
Yeah, you can find me at Best Fight Picks on Twitter, bestfightpicks.com, and my show Half the Battle is finally on iTunes, so subscribe now. But if you're not into the whole iTunes thing, that's cool too. We got YouTube, we got SoundCloud, so I interview all the fighters, and can't wait for you to check it out.
All right, and Paula, where can we find your writing and you on social media and anything you got coming up?
Yeah, I've actually got a couple of articles coming up. Breaking down or giving a little preview from a DraftKings perspective for all 3 cards with today's knockout. I got a piece on Aldo. I'm going to be working on a piece with McGregor. I've got something on Sportsnet with Weidman and Rockhold. So really just getting busy. I took a couple of days off from my day job because, this is a big event. Like I've said, I can't say more than enough. And you know what? Just started a podcast, as we mentioned earlier on the show. It's at MMA Dish. Currently we're on the 2nd episode, rolling down. And just come follow us. Subscribe to us on iTunes, on SoundCloud, and coming up for our next. We're actually going to record our next episode tomorrow. Can't really mention the guest yet, but it's going to be a pretty fun podcast. Come check us out, guys.
Yeah, congrats on finally launching the podcast with your co-host, and I know it's been something you've been wanting to do for a while. So congrats.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thanks. I was trying to get more out of this. Yeah, just trying to keep doing more, man.
Just, for sure.
Talking to more people.
All right, you can follow me on Twitter at NickUFC. Check out my website, mmajr.co, for all your coverage of Fight Night 80, TUF 22 Finale, and the big main course, UFC 194. Great fights. Tune in. Check out my website. Check out my weekly podcast I host it with John King each and every week. MMA Junior Radio. This past week, we had Tamden McCrory and John Howard on the show. Tamden takes on Josh Salmon next week, and then John Howard, of course, fights Tim Means this weekend. Next week, we have the best MMA analyst in the game, Robin Black, to break down all 3 cards on the show. We have Mike Pierce, who takes on Ryan LaFleur, returns to action this weekend. And we have Serwin Kakai, who recently signed with Bellator. He came on my podcast a couple days back. It'll be on air on Wednesday, episode 36. And he's coming on to talk about his release from UFC. He basically said he could not believe that he was cut from the UFC after losing just 1 fight, winning a fighter's debut. 3 articles I just posted Mike Pierce, he goes into detail about why he's been out for so long, talks about his prolonged hand injury. I quote, he says, "It was just a freak accident." Another article I have out right now on MMA Junior, John Howard. He wants a rematch with Ryan LaFleur if LaFleur beats Pierce and if Howard beats Means. Obviously they fought back in April of 2014. He suffered from a nasty groin strike, which he feels changed the fight. He feels he got cheated out of that matchup. And another article, like I mentioned, Sterling Kakai still in disbelief after receiving his UFC release. I just want to shout out quickly one of my new writers, Seth Scrimshaw. He's a 18-year-old kid from New Zealand. He's been doing some fantastic breakdowns of fights. He just recently broke down Jacare Romero, so you can check that out. He broke down Jim Miller's ground game. And one other article I want to quickly shout out is my article on Tamden McCrory, basically talking about absolutely everything, saying everything happens for a reason, and he's back for good this time. So with that, thanks to you guys for tuning in. Paulo, Daniel, I know Daniel's gone already, but Paulo, thanks for coming on as always. And with that, enjoy the fights.